And good afternoon to you, Pittsburgh Steelers fans. Welcome to another episode of Steelers Brunch with Tony. I am your host, Tony Defeo. I hope you're having a great weekend. Are weekends still a thing? I think they are. If they are, I hope you're having a good one, and I hope it continues to be a good weekend for you. As always, thank you for joining me. I'm looking forward to giving you guys another great episode. And before I start today's broadcast, I'd like to, as always, encourage you to subscribe to the Behind the Steel Curtain YouTube channel. We have an endless supply of podcasts. We bring them to you daily. There's The Standard is the Standard, hosted by BTSC editor Jeff Hartman, and he's often joined by Lance Williams, Brian Anthony Davis, the infamous Bad, or the famous Bad, I should say. Dave Schofield often appears on there. And when he's not on there, he's on the Stat Geek with his big brother, Big Bro Sco. There's Yeah, I Said It, hosted by the great Lance Williams. I hope I'm covering them all. There's Steelers Q&A with myself and Brian Anthony Davis on Mondays at 5:00. That's called Steelers Q&A in the off season. In the regular season, it's called Steelers Hangover, where Brian and I discuss the previous day's Steeler game. And obviously, I welcome you to check out Behind the Steel Curtain, the blog site. We have 10 articles a day, just about every day. So many great writers on there. I've been there for a decade. Again, Jeff Hartman's the editor, and Dave Schofield is the deputy editor, and they bring you the news daily. Anytime there's a breaking story, you're going to see it on there. And there's commentary, there's film breakdowns, there's just everything that you need for your Steelers fix on a daily basis. So please check that out and subscribe to the YouTube channel. So I figured today, instead of focusing on one topic, I would cover several. Sometimes with brunch or dinner or lunch or breakfast, you eat one meal, you have one entree and maybe a side. Some days when you have brunch, you go to the buffet and you get several different things. And today I'm going to touch on several different topics. And hello to everybody in the live chat. Ryan Kellerman, the Jared Devil, that's a great name. Just Me, another great name. You have to be just you, right? Ezra's on there. Aqua Noob. Thank you guys for joining me. So, and where can I begin today? No other than the James Harrison podcast from last week. He appeared on a podcast called Going Deep. It's a Barstool feature, and he was interviewed by Stephen Shea and former Steelers offensive lineman Willie Colon. And I read about the podcast online. I saw the quotes, and I assumed that the big story to come out of that interview, and it was about an hour and a half long interview. It was really great. I assumed the big story would be his bitter end to his career. How when in 2017 he came back, he signed a 1-year deal. According to him, he was promised a certain percentage of snaps, but the Steelers drafted T.J. Watt, and T.J. Watt quickly became a superstar. He was a one-rep learner, as Mike Tomlin called him at the time. And of course, Bud Dupree was the starter on the other side. Joey Porter, the outside linebackers coach at the time, made it clear that he wanted to go young at the position, and they stuck to their guns the entire season. And James obviously had a problem with this, and as everybody knows, he did everything he could to get himself cut from the team, which he ultimately did in the Christmas weekend of 2017, the next to last game. And then, of course, he went and signed with the Patriots. He played in the Super Bowl with them, and then he retired. So I figured that would be the big thing. And again, he covered a lot of great topics. If you haven't had a chance to listen to it, it's a great, when you see it in print, you just see, this is James being bitter and contentious and rebellious, his typical self. But when you listen to the podcast, when you listen to him, he sounds like he's enjoying his retirement, and he sounds like he's at peace with things, and he's just shooting the breeze with his old teammate and this guy Steven. So I thought he was very insightful, but of course, the big story to come out of that was he alluded to a envelope that head coach Mike Tomlin gave him in 2010 after he was fined $75,000 for a hit on Browns receiver Muhammad Massaquoi. And of course, Harrison was in trouble that entire year, actually 2010 and 2011, for headshots. That was at the time when the league really started to ramp up its efforts on player safety. There were so many tragic stories in the news of former players who were suffering effects of playing football in years gone by when the league did not take concussion seriously. They didn't. It's a well-known fact. So the league basically decided on the fly to start legislating these hits out of the game, and James was basically caught in the middle of it. And yeah, he did. There were a lot of head-to-head hits that he was guilty of, but there were also a few instances where it looked like he had clean hits on quarterbacks and receivers, and he was fined anyway, or he was penalized and then fined. So, if Mike Tomlin did hand him an envelope, which he was implying it was to cover a fine, I think that's all it was. I think the Steelers were just as vocal as James Harrison in those days, if you remember, about how the league was going about trying to change the rules on the fly. And the league had a right to do it, but it was still a frustrating time for teams like the Steelers to try to adjust to this. And players like Harrison, who he wasn't necessarily a dirty player, but he did like to play on the fringes. I mean, I think it's a safe thing to say. It's a accurate thing to say. But he was probably not as dirty a player as people remember. He just has that reputation because he's James Harrison. That's the kind of reputation that Jack Lambert had. He played on the fringes, but he was also a very good football player. So anyway, I think what this amounted to, it wasn't a bounty gate, as some are trying to say. People like Sean Payton have come out, saying that the league's going to sweep this under the rug. They're not going to take it as seriously as they took the issue with the Saints. Well, of course not, because the Saints was more of a systemic thing, and it was proven, right? It was Greg Williams, the defensive coordinator at the time, was asking his players to hurt opposing players for a bounty, and what the thing that happened with Harrison, again, it sounds to me like it was just, all right, we don't think this is right. We don't think it's right that you're being singled out, and we're going to pay the fine. And that's even if it's true. And there are many people saying, well, the league's going to investigate this, and Tomlin could get suspended for this, and maybe they are, but how are they going to prove it? That's my issue. Is how are they going to prove this? I mean, it's a decade old. This is something that happened 10 years ago. How are they going to go back and investigate? Is James Harrison maybe the most defiant guy the Steelers have ever employed? Certainly one of the most defiant and rebellious people to play in the NFL in quite some time. He's not even playing for anymore. Is he going to cooperate with the league? Is he going to tell them what was in the envelope, or is he just going to tell them to go pound salt, a la James Harrison, typical James Harrison? Is he going to suddenly cooperate? Are people from the past going to come forward and say, oh yeah, we covered his fine. We all got together as teammates and covered James Harrison's fine? I mean, is that going to happen? And even if they say it, I mean, where is the proof? I mean, I think that the league would be foolish to levy any kind of serious fine against Tomlin or the Steelers without solid proof. And at this point, all we know is that James Harrison said he was given a envelope by Mike Tomlin, and he would not say what was in the envelope. So I think it would be a bigger deal, honestly, if this was a systemic thing with the Steelers over the past decade, where they employed so many guys who were getting in trouble for this kind of thing. And you could say, okay, well, if this was going on with James Harrison and they were covering his fine, maybe they really were asking their players to hurt other players and rewarding them for it. But that hasn't really been the case with the Steelers over the past decade. And James Harrison himself, I mean, he was suspended. People may not remember this, but he was suspended for a game in 2011 for a hit on Colt McCoy in a Thursday night game. He was a Browns quarterback at the time, and he really did clean up his act after that. It really wasn't an issue for him in the remaining years of his career. Being fined for headshots. It wasn't a thing for him anymore. And again, it hasn't been a big thing for the Steelers since 2010, 2011, that time period. So I don't know, what kind of competitive advantage the Steelers would have gained from covering James Harrison his fines. I mean, he was still being fined. The league still got its money. They were still being penalized during the games. And again, James Harrison ultimately got suspended for it. So it wasn't like James Harrison was allowed to go about his business and continue his rampage of hurting opposing players. I mean, he was punished for it, and he straightened his act out. So it's just going to be a big deal moving forward. It might be. Should it be? I honestly don't think so. So those are my views on that subject, and I guess it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I guess we should thank James Harrison in this during this ongoing pandemic for giving us some tasty little nuggets to talk about. So again, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. So next thing I'm going to talk about is the Steelers' schedule. I know it was announced about a week and a half ago, but that was right before my last show, and I had a different topic in mind. I want to talk about something else, so I didn't really get a chance to talk about that on the Brunch with Tony episode episode 2. So I'll talk about that episode 3, and I really like it. I really like the schedule. I like the fact that it's kind of like an under the radar sort of schedule, and the Steelers really can't. It's hard for a team like Pittsburgh to go under the radar. I mean, they're a national team. They're a marquee franchise. They're always going to be in the news. People are always going to pay attention to them. But I think this is the kind of schedule where the league is saying, look, you're not so high on the marquee anymore. We're gonna concentrate on the Chiefs. They're the defending champions. We're going to concentrate on the 49ers. We're going to concentrate, of course, on the Patriots because, they're the Patriots. And how are they going to do without Tom Brady? How's Bill Belichick going to perform without his top player? And of course, they're going to focus on the Buccaneers because they acquired Tom Brady. They signed Tom Brady, and they traded for Rob Gronkowski. They convinced him, or at least Brady did. They convinced him to come out of retirement, and now they're suddenly a Super Bowl contender. So, and as far as within the AFC North, the Ravens are going to get all the pub because they have Lamar Jackson, a reigning MVP, and of course the Browns are an up and coming team, at least as far as personalities. They have a lot of great personalities now. Baker Mayfield, Myles Garrett, Jarvis Landry, OBJ, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, I think it's only natural for the public to focus on those teams and not a Steelers team that has a 38-year-old quarterback and has missed the playoffs 2 years in a row. So this kind of schedule is going to sort of let them go under the radar. They have 10 1 o'clock starts, which I really like. I mean, that's my favorite. My favorite start time is 1 o'clock on the East Coast. To me, that's the best time to kick off a football game. That's quote unquote real football, even though it's not real football. It's all real football, but I think that's just a really great time. And people like Mike Tomlin might say, "Oh, we love the primetime games," and I'm sure they do, and I'm sure players get hyped up for it. But professional athletes and coaches, they're creatures of habit. I think they love their structure, and even if they don't realize it, I think having 10 1 o'clock starts, including 7 games at home, where you can just kind of roll out of bed, get to the facility, get yourself ready, and play a game. I think that's really going to benefit them. They usually have 5 primetime games, and this year they only have 4. So I think that's that's really going to benefit them. And something that John Clayton, he's a NFL insider, a longtime journalist. He's actually from Pittsburgh. He was on 93.7 The Fan the other day with Andrew Filipponi and Chris Muller, and he brought up a really good point that I never even thought of. Of course, that's why he's John Clayton and I'm not. And he mentioned the fact that the Steelers are going to be playing 11 quarterbacks in 2020 that have 3 years of experience or less. And I realize that not all 3-year quarterbacks are created equal. The perfect example is Patrick Mahomes. So he's been in the league for 3 years, and he's already won an MVP in the Super Bowl, and he's the face of the league. He's the best player in the league right now, or at least the the most popular. So, and there's a lot of good quarterbacks that they're going to be playing this year. Deshaun Watson, I think he's a really good quarterback. Of course, Baker Mayfield's up and coming. Lamar Jackson's reigning MVP. So these are all really good quarterbacks. Dak Prescott's a really good quarterback. But there's nobody on the list that makes you go, oh my goodness, how are they going to deal with him? You don't have Tom Brady, you don't have Aaron Rodgers, you don't have Drew Brees, you don't have Matt Ryan, anybody like that you really have to worry about. And furthermore, they're playing. Each year a team has to play a division from out of conference and one division from in their own conference. And this year for the Steelers, it's the AFC or I'm sorry, the NFC East and the AFC South. And there's good teams in those divisions, obviously, but there aren't teams that you don't have to. You're not worrying about the defending Super Bowl champion. You're not worrying about the runner-up. They faced both of them last year. They faced the Patriots in Week 1, and then they had to play the Rams later in the year without Ben. I mean, they beat the Rams, but point being, those are really they were really two good teams that they had to face last year, and as far as that is concerned, they don't have to worry about that this year. So I think they can really, again, go under the radar and really do some damage, and it'd be, if they had to play, for example, the NFC South this year. I mean, you have obviously Tom Brady, you have Matt Ryan, you have Drew Brees, you have Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, that's a pretty good murderer's row of quarterbacks for a defense to face, even one as good as the Steelers. But I'd rather take my chances with Carson Wentz and Dak and Dwayne Haskins, who's a very young quarterback with the Redskins going into his second year, and Daniel Jones, another second-year quarterback for the Giants. So I think that can benefit them, and as far as the AFC South, they're taking on players like Gardner Minshew and again Deshaun Watson, who's really good, but he still has yet to reach that second level. They're going to be playing Josh Allen, who I think has potential, but I mean they faced him last year at Heinz Field when the Bills came here in December, and they did a really good job against him. I think that they would have won that game with better quarterback play. I think it's safe to say, but I think the defense kept him in check. So I think all in all, it's a good opportunity for them to, as I keep saying, go under the radar. I mean, let the NFL focus on the Ravens and the Browns and the 49ers and the Chiefs and the Patriots, and let the Steelers quietly go about their business and quietly play all these 1:00 games. And who knows, maybe they can prove a lot of people wrong, because there are a lot of people who don't. Even though they have a franchise quarterback coming back, and they have a really good team in place that he's going to be returning to. They have, in my opinion, the best defense in the NFL, and they have good skill position players. They don't have Antonio Brown, they don't have Le'Veon Bell, but they do have some pretty good skill position players, and they're adding to that a quarterback that if he's as close to his old self as he can get at the age of 38 and recovering from elbow surgery. I mean, I don't understand why they're not people aren't higher on the Steelers. So again, I really love the schedule, and I think that they can do some damage this year. So those are my thoughts on the schedule. And next thing I want to talk about is the new rookie class, and the fact that they just conducted their first rookie camp. Guys like Chase Claypool, Anthony McFarland, Alex Highsmith, all the undrafted free agents. I mean, they're Carlos Davis, you name it. Their first rookie mini camp was done so virtually, meaning they had to get their offensive and defensive playbook and the installs, as they call them. They had to get those virtually. And then they had to go out and practice these moves and these plays on their own. And they had to go out and practice on their own. They can't obviously be with with the team. They have yet to meet their coach, their head coach, their coaches, their fellow rookies. All the things that you would do at a rookie minicamp. They haven't had a chance to do that yet. So it's totally unprecedented. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that. Like who can absorb this material, who needs to have a coach screaming at him and disciplining him and showing him how to do it firsthand. Because everybody learns differently, right? Some people need to be screamed at. Some people just need to be given the details, and they're independent learners, and they can improve with mental reps alone. Some people need mental reps, but they also need to get this all down and figure it out that way by doing. Some people can get better by seeing, and some people need to see it and then do it. I fall in the latter category. I mean, you can explain something to me, and I might get the gist of it, but until I start applying it and get the muscle memory down, I really don't know if I understand what I'm learning on paper or on screen. So, and when you really think about it, it's so weird what these guys are going through, because again, as I said, by now they would have met their coaches, they would have met their rookie teammates, and when it comes to OTAs, I'm sure they would have had OTAs by now. They would have met their veteran teammates, guys that they probably grew up watching. Somebody like Big Ben. Can you imagine watching a quarterback like that, or Cam Hayward, or whomever, watching those players for years? They probably seem larger than life to you if you're a kid or a teenager, and then all of a sudden you're sharing the same locker room with them. You're sharing the same practice field with them. There has to be jitters. I mean, if I had the ability to play in the NFL, which I never did, but say I did, I would have been my first year of eligibility to play in the NFL would have been like the mid-90s. It'd have been like me stepping into the same huddle or the same locker room with Joe Montana or Ronnie Lott or Reggie White, like these all-time greats, right? I would have been so nervous. And but of course, after I got to know these guys, I probably would have been okay. So every rookie goes through this every year. I'm sure. And once you get through the off-season workouts, the OTAs, that kind of thing, maybe you get a better understanding of what it's like to be screamed at by Mike Tomlin. I mean, speaking of an iconic coach that you grew up watching, you saw this coach every Sunday afternoon for a decade or whatever, and suddenly he's your boss. And now you get to experience what it's like to be screamed at by him or to be disciplined by him. And, and even before you get to training camp, you get an understanding of, okay, who's going to take me under their wing, who might feel threatened by me, who might be territorial, who might be standoffish, who's outgoing, who's the practical joker, who's the guy that's going to take us out to dinner and make us pay the bill, which is probably going to be many thousands of dollars. You get an understanding of that by the time you get to, even before you get to training camp. And these guys have yet to even meet any of their new teammates or their coaches or anything. So it's going to be interesting to see who adjusts, who adapts, and again, it's totally unprecedented for them, because if you grow up dreaming about playing in the NFL and being drafted into the NFL, I mean, who would have ever thought that it would be done so virtually? You wouldn't even get to meet the commissioner. You'd have to stay in your home because of a ongoing pandemic, and then of course, again, you have to meet your new coach and your teammates via Zoom meetings, and you have to learn the new terminology through those kind of meetings, as opposed to in person in a classroom or whatever. So to me, it'd be like if you made the Super Bowl for the first time as a young player, and instead of having 2 weeks of build up for it, you get only 1 week, or instead of being introduced, individually, like so many players were, the starters anyway, for years, everybody gets introduced all as one. That's what happened to the 0-1 Patriots. Bill Belichick decided we're all going to be introduced as one for Super Bowl, I think it was 36. So, you grow up dreaming of how your experiences as an NFL player are going to go, at least the early days, and then you have to go through all this. So it's going to be interesting to see who adapts, who suffers. Because I remember Lynn Swann talking about his rookie experience and how that year, 1974, there was a player strike at the beginning of training camp, and all the veterans walked out. And for some reason, I don't know why, but the rookies still got to participate in training camp. And as Swan put it, when all the veterans finally came back 2 or 3 weeks later, the rookies were like, "This is our camp. We've been here. This is our camp. You're coming into our camp." Well, the 2020 rookies are experiencing the complete opposite of that. They're probably going to be behind the 8 ball. At least most of them will by the time they set foot in Pittsburgh and on the South Side facilities or at Latrobe if there is a training camp at Latrobe this year. So again, it's going to be interesting to see how they adjust. So those are my thoughts on that. And next up, I want to talk about an article I wrote the other day. Basically, one I'm not sure if many people understood, and that was the one about how Tom Brady, who just signed with the Buccaneers, is already worth so much more to his new team than Ben Roethlisberger ever was to the Steelers. And it wasn't really satirical, but it kind of was. Basically, it was my way of saying that the NFL is already is perfectly fine with making the Buccaneers a Super Bowl contender simply because they signed a 43-year-old quarterback. And I realize he's the greatest quarterback ever, and according to the opinions of many, but he's still 43, or at least he will be in August by the time they play. So they're willing to make them contenders, and even though they have a really tough division, I just mentioned the division, the NFC South is very, very tough, and it's very quarterback rich. And but they're still willing to give them 5 primetime games and again push them from like the middle of the pack all the way up to the top. And I get it. The Buccaneers are a very good team. They have Tom Brady's walked into a potentially really good situation. Bruce Arians is a good coach. He's a very good head coach. He has offensive firepower. Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, O.J. Howard. Again, they acquired Gronk. They have a really good defense. So I can see the Buccaneers getting the love. But what I don't understand is why the Steelers, like I mentioned earlier, why they're not getting more love from the national media. It's like people are just so willing to write them off, and especially Ben Roethlisberger, they're just so willing to write him off. And they wanted them to, some people wanted the Steelers to cut him, before they even knew if he was going to be 100% healthy after his elbow surgery. They wanted them to sign Jameis Winston or Andy Dalton or any number of veteran quarterbacks just in case Big Ben can't hack it this year. And there's no confidence in the backup quarterbacks. But as I mentioned already, if Big Ben is the Big Ben of old, or as close to it as he can possibly be, I don't understand why the Steelers aren't going to be considered major Super Bowl contenders. Again, they have the best defense in the NFL, in my opinion, and if they don't have the best, it's certainly one of the best. They have a defense full of playmakers who take the football away, who of course get after the quarterback at a consistent rate all the way back since the second half of 2016, really, but especially since 2017 when they initially set a franchise record for sacks. So, they have playmakers on defense. They get after the quarterback. Now they're taking the football away. Do I expect them to get 38 takeaways again this year? Maybe not. It's hard to do that in today's NFL, but I certainly don't see the defense falling off to 15 takeaways again, like 2 years ago. I think the problem with the Steelers defense for so many years wasn't the fact that it wasn't getting 40 takeaways in a season. It just wasn't. It was lucky if it got 20. I don't see this defense with the playmakers with T.J. Watt and Bud Dupree, who's a playmaker. If whether people want to admit it or not, he's a really decent playmaker. Of course, Minka Fitzpatrick and Devin Bush, who we may have just scratched the surface of what he can do. You have a defense full of playmakers I don't see it going from 38 takeaways down to 20. If they don't get at least 30 again, I'll be shocked. So you have a great defense. You have skill position guys who again aren't Antonio Brown or Le'Veon Bell. They're not included anymore, but they are. Juju Smith-Schuster has proven himself in the past. Like I talked about already, Deontay Johnson showed great potential last year in his rookie year. James Washington made a huge leap from his rookie year in 2019. You have a decent stable of backs, including James Conner, who, when healthy, can play at a Pro Bowl level. And then the line, who I think should only benefit from Ben's presence. Teams aren't going to be able to cheat with 8-9 in the box to take away the run anymore. They're going to have to honor the pass as long as Ben is healthy. And of course, you have tight ends who, Vance McDonald, who he couldn't be the Vance McDonald of 2018 last year because of the quarterback play. You had two young quarterbacks that you're trying to who are trying to learn how to play in the NFL unexpectedly, by the way. And of course, Eric Ebron, who, if he's the Eric Ebron of a few years ago, could be a really dangerous weapon for them. So my whole point in that wasn't that I didn't think that Brady didn't deserve or the Buccaneers didn't deserve the attention. Obviously they do. If you had a player like Tom Brady, the national media is going to pay attention. And if it's a good team that you're going to, which I think they are, then they're going to be considered contenders. My only point with that whole thing was, why aren't the Steelers being considered as contenders? Big Ben's can be a big difference maker if he's healthy. So I don't get that, why people are writing them off. But in a weird way, it is kind of nice too, because as I mentioned while talking about the schedule, it gives them an opportunity to go under the radar a little bit. So that's my feelings on that. And finally, I want to talk about one more thing before I go to the questions and comments, and that's the Jay Glazer story from a couple weeks ago. In case you don't know, Jay Glazer, who's an NFL insider for Fox, I guess he writes for The Athletic, because he was answering a question in a mailbag session column from The Athletic, where somebody asked him about Ben's off-season conditioning, and he basically mocked it and said, don't ever put Ben and the word conditioning in the same sentence. And he joked that Ben's idea of a off-season conditioning program is a little yoga, some golf, some beer, maybe cigars, whatever else he said. And then he later appeared on Fox Sports Radio with Jason Smith and Mike Harmon, their show. I think it was last week, and he basically said he was joking, and that these are things that Ben has told him in the past. But if you've been following Ben for his entire career like I have, then you could totally see Ben saying these things, but also saying them in a sarcastic way. I mean, that's Ben. I've often called him passive aggressive Ben, right? He likes to kind of he's a bit of a diva. There's no question about it. And you could certainly see him going to Jay Glazer. Oh, me, my off-season workout is a little yoga, some beer, some cigars. You know how I do it, just sort of messing with Glazer, like he messes with the reporters in general. I mean, you often see how he talks to guys after games. Remember a few years ago after that Jacksonville game where he threw 5 interceptions, the reporters kept pressing him on what was wrong. And he said, well, maybe I don't have it anymore. And of course the media took that and they ran with it. But if you listen to the soundbite, he was clearly being sarcastic. He was clearly just saying, being passive aggressive, saying, it was his way of saying this is ridiculous. It was just one bad game. But the media still brings this up to this day. There was that guy, I forget the reporter's name, the writer's name, but he wrote that Bleacher Report article a few months ago about how the Steelers should cut ties with Ben, and he cited that quote. I'm not sure if he actually did enough research to know that Ben was clearly joking or being a smartass to this reporter in that day in the locker room in 2017. So, my opinion on Ben is: do I think he's a fitness freak? No. Of course he's not. I mean, anybody would be foolish to say that. He's not a fitness freak. He doesn't maybe take the time that other athletes do. But to suggest that he's gotten this far, in his career and accomplished all that he has, the Super Bowls, the passing yards, all the stats, and to think that he does that just by showing up to training camp every year and getting in shape and then playing a season without doing anything in the off season. That's just, come on. That, to me, that's disrespectful to what these guys, to how hard these guys have to work just to get to that level. Even your fringe NFL player has to do all that he can, has to really give it 110% in conditioning and everything just to barely scrape by in the NFL. So, and it's not like there haven't been stories in the past of Ben really paying attention to his fitness in the offseason. Back in 2016, it was well known that he engaged in a rigorous cardio program the entire offseason. He lost 15 pounds, So what makes anybody think that was the one and only time he did that, and that he stopped doing that after that? He's obviously, I would assume, been doing that since then, or you're just not going to last this long if you're not taking care of your body in the off season. Ben has always been a weekend warrior, but to say that his conditioning program is equal to a weekend warrior like me, to me, that's just disrespectful. These guys are, they don't get to where they are by neglecting their conditioning and by neglecting the details. It takes a lot of work to do what Ben has done throughout his career. Very few quarterbacks have had the career that he has. He wouldn't have gotten this far again without dedicating his life to his craft. So that's all I want to talk about today as far as the topics. And now I'll open up to you guys as far as questions and comments, and I'll try to highlight them. And hopefully I become a better producer this week. Hopefully the third time's a charm, and I'm not a little behind with my little finger here. So let's see what you guys have to say. Here's one from Gyro. Let's see if I get that on there. I'm sorry, Donald Nolan. Once again, I'm behind. I'm sorry. It's from Donald Nolan. Tony, you should do an article on how many passing stats Ben is among leaders all time. I know he has 500-yard games. I think I think he's on par with Eli and Phillip Rivers. Those guys are Hall of Famers. And what did Peyton Manning retire with? I think 70-some thousand yards. So he's not far off. If he plays another few years, and his play is about as close to his prime years as possible. I could see him finishing his career with 70,000 yards. You don't have a career like that without being very dedicated to your craft. Here's one from Ezra. Let's see if I can get this up there. My biggest beef with Ben is that interview after that playoff loss to the Jags when he mentioned retirement. We wasted a 4th pick on Dobbs because of the interview. Besides that, that's my quarterback. Yeah, but maybe he shouldn't have made that public. But did the Steelers draft Dobbs because they thought he could be the heir apparent to Ben, or did they draft him because they thought he could be the heir apparent to Landry Jones? That might have been the plan, is they wanted to move on from Landry Jones, and they wanted Josh Dobbs to be the number 2 guy eventually. And they cut Landry in 2018, so it wasn't that long after that year that they let go of Landry Jones, and Josh Dobbs in 2018 was the number 2 quarterback. So I think that was more the reason why they drafted Josh Dobbs. I think, as I talked about before, I think if they do decide, when they do decide to go after Ben's heir apparent, I don't think they're going to do so in the 3rd or 4th round. That might be the plan right now with Mason Rudolph, but if he doesn't pan out, as I mentioned already, I think they're gonna be more aggressive, and they're gonna try to use the 1st round pick, or even if they think they have a ready-made Super Bowl team, a la the 2012 Broncos, I think they might try to go after a veteran to get them by for a couple years. Let's see what else I hear. Here's one from Guy. I think I missed one before, so I'll see if I can get this one up there. Do you think we draft a quarterback next year since that'll be Ben's last year on his contract. Well, I've been pretty consistent with this. I think they're going to wait until Ben retires. I think as long as he's here, they're going to try to do whatever they can to put as many weapons around him on offense and defense to try to win another championship or more than one championship. And if Mason if he progresses, I think people have to, whether they like his play or not last year, he definitely showed us more last year than he did in 2018 when he didn't play at all. So if he progresses, if he improves on 2019, then maybe they think it's him and maybe they go with him right away. But I don't think they try to find the next heir apparent, whether that's Ben's heir apparent until he finally leaves. So no, I don't think they're gonna do that again until Ben is gone. So that's those are my feelings on that. Let's see here. Will Ben pass Eli in passing yards this year since Eli is gone? I think Eli has. Let's see. Rivers, Breeze, and Brady all active quarterbacks with more yardage than Ben. That's true. I think Eli has, I want to say 57,000 yards. I think Ben has 56. So, barring an injury, then yeah, I think they will. He will pass him this year. As far as those other guys, it's going to be hard because Ben probably only has a couple more years left. So, if Brady plays another year or two, it's going to be hard for Ben to catch him. Philip Rivers, I don't know. I mean, I think Rivers has 59,000. I could be wrong. And Ben has 56, but he was injured last year. It's safe to assume he would have been around 60 or so had he not been injured. So they would have been more neck and neck. But to me, that doesn't really matter. Where he finishes in the yardage. The point for me is he's up there with the all-time greats. Whether he finishes 5th, 10th, 8th, whatever he finishes in yardage and everything, it's still a testament to how good of a career he had. And probably I think most people recognize the kind of quarterback that he's always been, but to those who have always overlooked him, I think when he finally does hang him up, they're gonna look at his stat line and go, wow, maybe we should have had him a little higher in most of our rankings throughout the years. So I think that Ben's place in NFL history is set no matter what happens. Here's one from Michael G. The only thing Ben needs to do is win one more. Yeah, I think his legacy is set. But if he wins 3, then he's in rarefied air. You're talking about obviously Joe Montana, Tom Brady, of course, who has the most. Terry Bradshaw. I'm not sure if anybody has more. If anybody else has, Troy Aikman has 3. So that's like the list is short for the number of quarterbacks with 3 Super Bowl titles. So if he wins one more, then he's in rarefied air. He's already an all-time great, but one more title again puts him on. It takes him to a level that very few quarterbacks have ever gone and probably ever will go. So I hope it happens. So let's see here. Here's one from Jeff Long. Ben obviously makes a big difference coming back. How much of a difference do new players and coaches make on offense this season? Well, that's a good question because when you have as far as like Chase Claypool, I think there, like I talked about a couple weeks ago, I think there's a great opportunity for him to step in there and make a difference, a la Martavis Bryant in 2014 and Juju in 2017 and Deontay Johnson last year. I mean, there's a precedent there for rookie receivers getting involved in the Steelers offense. So I think there's a good opportunity. A player like Anthony McFarland, of course, who was a 4th round pick. Do I see him starting? No, but the fact that Matt Canada, who's the new quarterbacks coach and who was his offensive coordinator and head coach at Maryland, the fact that he's here now, I think he's going to do what he can to try to get him into the offense. And of course, Eric Ebron, who was a free agent acquisition, he's obviously a weapon, so they'd be foolish not to try to utilize him. So I think they're certainly gonna make the effort to get all the new guys a chance to have an impact on the offense. Here's one from Guy Rowe. My bold opinion is that Claypool leads rookies in receiving yards. I hope that happens. So So anyway, folks, that's all I have for today. I appreciate the participation. I appreciate you watching, and I appreciate you you all the questions, and I look forward to doing this again next week. And I will see you guys on Monday with Steelers Q&A with Brian Anthony Davis. You guys have a great weekend. Take care now.